New reports surfaced over the weekend surrounding former President Trump's plans to attempt to invalidate President Joe Biden's election victory. According to the Wall Street Journal, the former president pressed the Justice Department to go directly to the Supreme Court to try to overturn the election results. Senior officials reportedly refused, citing no basis to challenge the results nor any legal interest when it came to determining who won the presidency. On top of all that, CBS News has confirmed a New York Times report from Friday that Mr. Trump also considered ousting then acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen in the hopes of replacing him with a loyalist who would be willing to take the case to the Supreme Court. Those efforts are said to have failed following pushback from the president's own Justice Department appointees. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News legal expert and analyst Rikki Klieman. Rikki, good to see you. So let's talk about these reports. How significant are they? And what I keep thinking about, Rikki, is, what a lot of legal experts have suggested that occurred over the last 4 years, but specifically the last 6 months or so, is, in fact, when you didn't have the checks and balances from the Senate or from the Congress, the courts. The courts were ultimately the one institution in this country that held firm, that did what they're supposed to do, how they were set up to behave and to perform. The question becomes, of course, what would have been the impact of following through with those plans to use the Department of Justice's power to help the former president continue in contesting the election results?
Well, what you're looking at, should the plan, in fact, be accurate, as it has been reported, is truly reprehensible conduct. And again, potentially impeachable conduct, because you're dealing with the fact that the Department of Justice is part of the executive. But nonetheless, the entire executive branch going forward in an attempt to invalidate election results becomes part of an entire scheme or plan, if you will, that culminated ultimately in the events of January 6th. I'm not certain that we are going to hear about this during the impeachment proceedings, but I certainly would not be surprised if we heard about it during the Senate trial of the impeachment.
You said reprehensible. You said certainly impeachable. You used the word scheme. Could that be similar to a conspiracy? And could this sort of behavior rise to the level of criminal?
We don't know what's going to happen with any possible criminal charges, either state or federal, in the future concerning Donald Trump now that he is an ordinary citizen. What we do know is that there are state proceedings, particularly in the state of New York, both in the district attorney's office and the attorney general of the state of New York, that are going forward, at least in terms of investigation. Certainly, Joe Biden has said before he took office that he really did not see any good in going forward with the Department of Justice going after Donald Trump. This is my paraphrase, because it isn't good for democracy. We usually do not, in a democracy, especially one as great that we have in the United States of America, act like a banana republic where you punish your political opponents. However, when you get to conduct that is actually dealing with an election result, then you're starting to look at something that is not simple. You're not looking at something such as the first impeachment, which we did about a year ago together, when we were looking at a phone call dealing with something in the Ukraine. You're really looking at the fundamental heart of the American system of a republic. So, although I use harsh words in my description of what this conduct was, do I expect it to go forth in the Department of Justice for possible indictments? Frankly, I don't. Do I expect it to come up during the impeachment? I'll say it this way. I'll be surprised if it doesn't.
So, Rikki, this all comes as former President Trump prepares for that impeachment trial, which is set to begin in 2 weeks. Can these reports be used against the former president in trial? I know that in a normal trial, like the one that we would be subjected to, there are rules pertaining to what can be introduced as evidence. What are those rules when it comes to the United States Senate and an impeachment proceeding?
The things that we have to remember is that when the Senate tries an impeachment case, just as when the House decides to go through an impeachment hearing and move it to the Senate for trial, this is a political process, and that's what it's supposed to be. It is not a criminal courtroom. So it is not the same thing as rules of evidence that are prescribed in books like the federal rules of evidence or various states' rules of evidence. So what you can have here are arguments, are briefs, and is a presentation that will take place after February 8th, that week, we are told it will start, that you're going to have a presentation by the House managers who are going to come over very solemnly this evening and deliver and present, that is, read the one article of impeachment of inciting an insurrection. That is, of course, separate from what we are just discussing about any allegedly nefarious plans to use his own Justice Department to try to overturn the election. However, it's up to the House managers how they are going to present their case, if you will, how they are going to try to persuade the Senate that this is an appropriate proceeding worthy of a conviction. Now, the 9 impeachment managers certainly have the ability to do this as what the lawyers would call a bare bones case, a clean case. They could come in, they could simply deal with January 6th, present the evidence that occurred on that day and that day alone, showing the president's own words at the rally, at the ellipse, before his followers marched to the Capitol and then went inside the Capitol in what has been termed a quote-unquote insurrection, certainly also termed a riot. And that evidence would be a bare-bones presentation. However, the House managers also have the right to present the case as they see fit to try to persuade the senators to convict, and they could go all the way back using Donald Trump's own statements, his press conferences, his moments before the press going to and from Air Force One, his tweets, and show the entire panoply, if you will, of statements that he made, which had to do with the fact that the election would not be legitimate, that the election was not legitimate, that there was all kinds of fraud in the election, and the whole theme of Stop the Steal. They could do that, by the way, in a very concise manner. It's not like they have to go to a lot of explanation. All they have to do, using technology, is simply string together statements that were made by this president, tweets that were made by this president at the time he was in office, and you could put it together as a montage to give to the Senate as the quote-unquote evidence. This is a political procedure. Always remember that. There's no one to say, I object, overruled, sustained, even though we assume, and I use the word assume with thought, we assume that Chief Justice John Roberts is going to preside because that is what many scholars, including myself as legal analyst, believe is appropriate. It is that it is his constitutional duty to preside in the trial of an impeachment proceeding before the Senate. There are other legal scholars who say that you cannot go forward with this proceeding, and therefore, since Donald Trump is no longer president, the Chief Justice does not have to preside. We may learn a little bit about that tonight. We'll certainly learn about it on February 9th.
Yeah, it looks like the president's attorneys are going to be having a lot to go through, because the longer we wait, as Vlad, you have pointed out, the more video we see, the more information we find out about what may have been going on behind the scenes. It's all very fascinating. Rikki Klieman, thank you so much.
Thank you, always.